Okay, we are on Daf Mem Beis. As is Hashem, we will finish the third parak and begin the fourth parak. Tonight we're going to start the last few words on Daf Mem Aleph Amid Beis. Rabbi Yossi Omer Yom Tov. Rabbi Yossi said in the Mishnah that if Yom Tov, if the first day Yom Tov fell out on Shabbos and you were busy with your Esrog and Lulav and you ended up being Moitzi Mirishus L'Rishus. So basically says, even though you forgot that it was Shabbos and you walked out of the house with it, and there's Rishus Harabim, and you're Chayiv Achatas, you did it b'shoigig. So basically says, since you were tired b'mitzvah, you're pater. So let's discuss that a bit. You were busy trying to be Mekayim of mitzvah.
Okay.
So it says, Amar Abaye, Lo Yishanu Ela Shelo Yotza Bay. This is only if you haven't yet fulfilled the mitzvah of lulav. So you were going to try to find out how to do the lulav, how to shake it, where to shake it, what to shake it. But if you already fulfilled the mitzvah and stam, and you brought it home from shul, you didn't realize you walked out, you're going to shul to be kind of mitzvah. So you didn't bring it out of Shabbos, and you were so excited to do the mitzvah, so you walked with the shul with your lulav and esrog. So you carried it, but that's fine. But if you walked home with it, then you'd be chayiv achatas. It's only if you're on your way to you were going to do the mitzvah. But if you already fulfilled the obligation, then you would be chayiv achatas. So, for the Gemara, how could that be? Because anytime once you pick up your lulav, you've already fulfilled your obligation. What's the mitzvah of lulav? Is to pick it up. Once you pick it up, you already fulfilled your mitzvah. So what's the hechatim? So when you're going to have a Rabbi Yossi scenario that you didn't fulfill, that you walked outside, but you didn't fulfill the mitzvah yet. Once you picked it up, you fulfilled the mitzvah.
Even if he didn't have mind.
Says Taisus. Taisus is not on this point, but he says we see from here that the Gemara must hold mitzvahs lav shechas kavana. Mitzvahs do not need intent to fulfill the obligation. So Amar Abaye kishahavcha, and this is where the eitzah comes from. Abaye says the scenario was he wasn't holding it properly. He was holding something upside down, and you can't fulfill the mitzvah if you're holding it upside down. Right? So that was his eitzah. I'm going to mention this again, because most people don't realize that many people pick up the lulav and esrog the right way, and then they walk over to the sign to make a bracha. They turn over their esrog, and then they make the bracha, and then they turn it back the right side way. Right?
I'm sorry.
People pick it up
the right way.
They pick it up the right way. They walk over wherever they are, and they turn the page to the sitter, and then they get ready to make the bracha. They turn it back upside down. They make the bracha, and then they turn it the right side way, and they shake it. Right? Then you have the problem. The agbe, once you picked it up the right way, you were yaitza.
Maybe they don't.
Well, one's on the wall, one is on an esrog, one's on a wall.
It's the same thing. We're talking about all four here. All four. All four. So
what time we done it or no? That's what we do when we take the esrog and we leave the esrog turn over.
Correct, but you have to start like that. When you pick up your esrog, you should pick it up upside down.
Upside down.
Exactly. Okay. That's the point I'm making. That when you pick it up, you should pick it up upside down.
40 years.
That's the other. The I mentioned this from the Taisus the other day. The other eitzah is to have in mind that you don't want to be yetz the mitzvah.
Okay.
Right? If you pick it before you pick it up, I'm picking this up not to fulfill the obligation. So then when you pick it up, since your kavanah was not, I don't want to fulfill the mitzvah until I make the bracha. So then you don't have to flip anything because you're already. If you have negative das, even if your mitzvah is lav tzrichas kavanah, but if you have in mind not to fulfill your obligation, you won't fulfill the obligation until you're ready. Correct. So that's one eitzah. Second eitzah is a Rava Amar afilu tema l'shalei havchu, even if the guy wasn't holding it upside down. You weren't holding your lulav and esrog. You had it in a kli. You had it in a kli. What does a kli mean? You had it in on a plate. You had it in a bag. Okay.
So you start from Cohen and Simon. It's on.
We're good. Rama afilu tema l'shalei havchu. Remember, Rava said that if you're wearing gloves and you take a lulav and esrog, you fulfilled the mitzvah. Lakicha, or if you're holding it, lakicha al yidei davar acher, holding it through something else. So if you're wearing gloves to take a lulav and esrog, you'd fulfill the mitzvah. So the Gemara is asking, well, what's the difference between holding, wearing gloves and taking a lulav and esrog, or carrying it out in a bag? If lakicha al yidei davar acher is shma lakicha, so then why is it taking it out in a kli any worse than holding it with gloves? Says the Gemara, Hani mili derech kavod, abel derech bezayin loy. So this is two extremes here. I'm not sure we had to go extreme. If you take it derech kavod, Rashi says, like if you take it with a sudder, shekarich yadav besudder, you put on gloves, and that's a derech kavod to hold lulav and esrog, with gloves to give a derech kavod. But to carry it derech bezayin, Rashi says kagayim bekara, you're putting it in a tray and you're holding it in a tray and you're carrying it out. That's not called derech kavod, right? That's lakicha d'avracha, right? I was thinking of your chiluk also. That one is, if you're carrying it in a bag, so you're carrying it. The point there is that I'm. It's like for sure I'm not trying to fulfill my mitzvah. I would never take lulav and esrog in a bag. That's not. It's called carrying it somewhere else. It's not called taking it. Okay. Says the Gemara. Amar Rav Huna. Omer hay Reb Yosi. Reb Yosi would say, Oilas ha'oif. He's going to give another example now of a situation where you were tarted in a mitzvah. You made a mistake, and you're going to be putter from bringing a carbon. So it says Amar Rav Huna. Omer hay Reb Yosi. Reb Yosi would say the following scenario. Oilas ha'oif. Shenimtzes bein agafayim. You found an oilas ha'oif amongst a bunch of other birds. The kasav or chatas ha'oifi, and you thought it was a chatas ha'oif. Now, generally, Rashi points out, oilas ha'oif and a chatas ha'oif were both, you did malika on both of them. Malika is when you put your nail through the bit of the neck of the animal, right? Generally, chatas ha'oif was done on the southwestern side of the mizbeach, and the oilas ha'oif was done on the southeastern side. Now, if it got crowded, so then you'd move over to the southwestern side. So it's possible that your oilas ha'oif and your oilas chatas ha'oif were on the same side. The ma'akiv between the two was that the chatas ha'oif, the blood was sprinkled on the bottom part of the mizbeach. The oilas ha'oif was sprinkled on the top of the mizbeach. Okay. The point is, though, this guy did a malika on the oilas ha'oif, and he chucked it down. He put it down, and they were jumping around the animals, and someone picked it up. And he picked up the oila, which is meant to be burnt on the mizbeach. He thought it was a chatas. Chatas you're supposed to eat, and he ended up eating it. He's eating an oila, but he thought it was a chatas. So that's meila. So you should be chayiv a carbon meila because you were mal behektish is meant to be brought on the mizbeach, and you ate it. So it says Rabbi Yosi, you're exempt from bringing the carbon meila. So, my kamashmalan, what's the chiddush? Rav Huna, what are you telling me here? The tabud are mitzvah pater. That's what the Mishnah said. So, what chiddush did you add with this story of the chatas ha'oif and the oilas ha'oif?
How's it different from
from walking out with lulav? So it says, "Mahu the tema hasam hu the tabud var mitzvah pater hainu da avar mitzvah." Maybe the only time you'll be pater when making a mistake because you were doing a mitzvah is when you actually fulfilled the mitzvah. So by lulav, the guy ended up taking lulav, so he got a mitzvah. But here where he didn't end up getting a mitzvah, he just didn't have a he ate the oilas ha'oif. No mitzvah happened over here. So maybe you would say that you don't have the tour of tabud var mitzvah. Kamash Shmuel, that you do.
Well, the guy with the lulav also did it. He was carrying it to Sharab. That the
correct, but he did it. He ended up doing it.
Might say
right. So you would think that maybe that should make a difference. Kamash doesn't make a difference if you actually fulfill the mitzvah or not. As long as you're involved in a mitzvah and you were tarred because of a mitzvah, that's enough to part you from a chatas. Back to Gemara, 1 second. Meisvei. The halacha is that a tamid needed to be checked out for 4 days. Needed to be kept separate, and they would watch it and make sure that it was okay. The carbon tamid for 4 days before it was brought.
All the kabbalah stuff had to be separated.
Is there a din for
No.
all karbanos? I don't know. I know the carbon
Just the
Pesach, just the carbon Pesach in Mitzrayim had such a halacha, but the regular carbon Pesach did not have such a halacha. I don't know if all karbanos. I don't know. But the carbon tamid does have a din of bikur for Dalit Yamim. That's actually one of the mekoros for slichas. One of the things they bring down about slichas, we start with slichas before Rosh Hashanah, is because the pasuk there says changes the lashon. It says va'asisem oila. When it comes to Rosh Hashanah, it doesn't say v'kraftem that you bring an oila. It says va'asisem. And the Chazal, someone says that va'asisem means you have to make yourself into an oila. You got to prepare yourself. Therefore, we have bikur for Dal Yam. We start slichas is at least 4 days before Rosh Hashanah. So we started. It's a minimum of 4 days. So we prepare ourselves, getting ourselves to be for Rosh Hashanah. Okay, but in any event, here this person went. It was Shabbos, and he went and he took a tamid. He shachted a carbon tamid that was not mevukar kilchasei. He didn't have this beaker for 4 days, and he did that on Shabbos. So halacha is that carbon that was no good, and he's chay v'chatas. V'tzarach tamid achi, you have to bring another carbon tamid. And this is the halacha is even if the carbon was fine, it had no mum, everything was fine with it. But if a beaker is ma'akiv b'diavad, and if you didn't do it, you got to bring a new carbon. So the question is, 1 second, why Rabbi Yosi says if you're tired of our mitzvah, this guy was eisig in the mitzvah, and he took what happened over here? He took it from the wrong lishka. They had different rooms in the base of Mikdash, right? There was one for where the says where they were checked and they were beaker, and he took it from the wrong place. So he was tired of our mitzvah, so he should be pater. Says the Gemara, Amalei bar minei dahi. The ha'itmar Allah Amar of Shmuel bar Chatoy Chiti. Amar of Humnuna Saba. Amar of Yitzchak bar Ashiyan. Amar of Huna Amar Rav. Kigain Shaviyo Milishka She'enem Karin. That's actually his problem. The problem is that he made a mistake by taking it from the wrong place. That means he wasn't even toya. He wasn't involved in the mitzvah yet. He was going to to go get an animal. So if you're going to go get the animal, you have to make sure you're taking it from the right office. If you take it from the wrong office, that is karv l'mezid, and therefore you that is not considered Torah Dvar mitzvah by taking it from the wrong place.
Why can't that be a mistake? He made a mistake just like he did before.
He did make a mistake. That's why it's chayav v'chatas, because he made a mistake. But he made too big a but why isn't that called Torah Dvar mitzvah? L'maisa. Here, there was no meaning. Once he has the animal and he's going to bring it, so then there's, I guess, an element of make sure you want to do it right. You want to make sure you do things right. But before you have the animal, before you have the right animal, the mitzvah is it's not chal on you yet. And therefore, you should have had the presence of mind to make sure you get the right animal from the right place. Okay, says the Mishnah. Last Mishnah of the parak. Here we go. Mikabelas isha miyad bina umiyad baila. Very feministic Mishnah. Where a woman, when her husband comes home from shul, she should take the lulav and esrog and put it into water. Machzir lamayim, and she puts it back into the water. B'Shabbos. That you're allowed to do on Shabbos.
But he's not allowed to come back with the esrog on Shabbos.
Okay, you're right. Correct. I didn't mean to come back from shul. Sorry. After he takes if he had it at home and he shook the lulav and esrog, so she takes it miyad b'no miyad baila machziras lamayim, and she can even do that on Shabbos. You could put your lulav and esrog, your ishana back into the water. You want to keep it in water. I don't know. I guess they used to actually keep it like in a vase, like we keep flowers. They kept it in water to keep it fresh. So you'd be allowed to put it into the water on Shabbos.
Why would you be having it all there? It should be on Shabbos before.
Correct. It had to be there before.
I'm saying
Shabbos morning, it was in the water.
Right.
Then you went and you shook lulav and esrog. Again, I was back in the day. We don't do that anymore. Back in the day, they used to take the lulav on Shabbos. So you shake the lulav and esrog on Shabbos, and then you put it back into the water. The chiddush is that even though you're not allowed to water plants on Shabbos, being that this was already in that water, you can return it to the same water.
But it's the woman.
And we'll see in a second why we talk about the woman. Rabbi Yehuda, I'm a b'Shabbos machzirin. On Shabbos, you're allowed to put it back into the same water. B'Yom Tov ma'asifin. On Yom Tov, you're even allowed to add new water, fresh water. U'b'mayid and achal mayid machlif, and you can change the water. That you cannot do on Yom Tov. Okay, that's the first halacha. Katan hayedel naneya. Once a child knows how to shake lulav, chayiv lulav. Rashi says his father is obligated to be machanechem midrabanon. He has an obligation of chinuch to teach him and to facilitate that for him. Okay, so slightly more pshita. What's the chiddush of this? Why? I mean, it's pshita this halacha, but really, like, why are we talking about an isha miyad bina? Like, why is the woman taking it? Who Oh, it's a big chiddush. A woman has no chiyuv to take lulav and esrog, and therefore maybe it should be considered muktzah. Maybe she shouldn't be allowed to take a lulav and esrog. She shouldn't be able to hold it. Since to her it's eitz and ba'alma. You can't pick up a branch on Shabbos, so this is a random branch. It should be muktzah. Kamash Malan, what's the chiddush? The chiddush is that since this is right for men, or they have a chiv to take it, and therefore it's not considered muktzah for men, it's not considered muktzah for her either. Now, I'll tell you where this is applicable, very nageya, for kids' toys. Right? If you have a child's toy, right? Now let's say is battery operated, right? So you think it'd be muktzah, right? But let's say it's off, so it's not going to make any noise. So the kids can play with it on Shabbos. The kid can play with it on Shabbos, and that's who it's for. So then, even for you, it's not going to be muktzah because it's a kid's toy. So if it's fit for him to use, so then it's not considered muktzah. That's the lumdus of this of Gemara is that as long as the person who's using it, this is a kli, this is meant to be used, so then it's a kli, and it's not, and it's meant to be used on Shabbos, so it's not muktzah.
Yeah, but the big difference between a child and an adult. The child is not the
If they can't do muktzahs, they can't play with muktzah. There are halachas of muktzah for them. Say it, but then I can't use it. But it would still be muktzah. But I'm saying things that are meant for a kid to play with, right? Even though you would never play with them, so really for you they should be muktzah. But this is a kid's toy, and the kid plays with it, so then it's not muktzah.
But this is also in our scenario here. The woman is not. There's nothing wrong. The woman does bench lulav and esrog, or sits in the sukkah, or I mean, they do that.
Correct, but
so it's not. It could be. It's not really muktzah for her either because she could do it if she wants.
Interesting point. I was thinking about that. From this Gemara. If it sounds like if you're not a bas chiyuva, if you don't have an obligation to do it, even though you could do it, so there are two ways to go, right? If you don't have the obligation, even though you could, well, maybe you can't because it's not. But if you could do it, so then maybe it's not muktzah. You don't have the chiyuv, but you have a mitzvah to do it. So then, if I have a mitzvah to do it, so then it is right for me too. From this Gemara, it doesn't sound like that. At least the Kamashlan, the way Rashi learns the Kamashlan. You take a look at the Kamashlan. Rashi says, "Kivan de roilan tilas anashim." It's 2, 4, 6, 7 line down. It's the very wide lines. Kivan de roilan tilas anashim, teres kliyalav, umuter betilta lakol. So it's a good point. Rashi sounds not like that. Rashi is saying Rashi could have said, "Well, it's right for nashim because women are allowed to shake lulav." I don't know if that would be. I don't know. It's a good point. It's a good ha'ara. Okay.
It's not what he's saying.
The right in the tilas anashim for men. Correct. Therefore, teres kli 11 has the properties of a kli, and therefore matil then anybody can use it. Rashi doesn't say that kivan de roil in the tilas nashim. That's a good ha'ara. Why not? Okay. Zok the Gemara. Katan Haydel and Aneya. Tarabon. So ma'alachas of chinuch. Katan Haydel and Aneya chayv belulav. A child who knows how to shake it is chayv. Obligated in lulav means again the father is obligated to mechanech. This atif, if he knows how to wrap himself up, then chayv betzitzis. He's obligated to wear tzitzis. Lishmar tfilav. If he knows how to protect his tefillin, Rashi says that means that he won't go into the Beis Hakisei, he won't go into the bathroom with them. So then, chayiv, where'd it go? I lost it. Aviv lekeach le tefillin. And his father purchased for him tefillin, which is very interesting why it says that here. His father purchases him for tefillin.
Rather than what?
I don't know, just the same way it said before. So, chayiv b'tefillin, or something like that.
Chayiv b'tefillin. Now, he's not chayiv
Why does it say
I
his
think it
father
shows that it's an
purchases him?
obligation for
It
the
didn't say
parent.
purchase, it said like,
I
It
think
says
it
right.
shows that it's an obligation for the father.
Right. Which is an interesting halacha. But I'll tell you why. Because once a kid's bar mitzvah, once he turns 13, then it's his personal obligation.
he has to buy it.
He should really have to buy tefillin, and if he can't afford it, so then everybody should have to buy grooms or whatever. I mean, it's a chiyuv on everybody. Right? The only time the father has a chiyuv really to buy it for him is mitzvah chinuch.
Mhm.
Right? The father's obligation to buy his son tefillin is before he's bar mitzvah.
And they do.
Exactly.
So maybe
Right?
that's
They
why
do
the
buy
kid,
before
maybe
time.
that's why the kid wanted to wear it 30 days
Before. Right?
Make sure
Because of
Papa
buys it.
exactly. That's and maybe that's why it says here of lekeach letefillin. It's an interesting lashon. It says a dafki here. Okay. Yedeya. No. Yedeya ledaber. Once he knows how to speak. Where'd it go here? Avav v'laim de Torah. His father teaches him Torah v'kriyashma. Interesting. What can he teach a kid who just learns how to speak? So what are you going to teach him? So it says two things. Torah v'kriyashma. Torah mahi. What does that mean? Amar of Hamnuna. Torah tziva lanu Moshe merasha kilas Yaakov. That's the first words of Torah that a child learns. Kriyashma mahi. Pasuk Rishon. The first pasuk of Shema. Shema Yisrael Shema Hashem Echad. Those are the first two things that once a child knows how to speak, those are the things that he's supposed to learn. Okay, a child knows how to watch himself from becoming tamei. So then oichlan al gufa taharis. That means if his body touched something, you can assume that he is tahar, and therefore you can eat. He's not going to be matama the stuff, the food.
In other words, he's old enough to realize that there's something coming around him.
Correct.
Not to touch it.
Not with his hands. That's the second age. The first age is if he knows that if his
First age is the body.
he knows how to protect his body from touching or carrying or going in an oil with something. So then, but yadav is the second stage. He knows how to watch his hands from touching things. Lishmas yadav. He knows to keep his hands, or he knows, he's conscious enough to know where his hands are and where they're going. So then he's able. Then even if he touched something with his hands, you can if he says that they're tar, you can trust that he's tar. Means he knows that if he touched something dummy, he knows to watch his hands and stuff like that. Yes. Next. Hayedeh lishol. If he's aware enough that if you ask him a question, he can answer you about whether he is if he tamei tahor or he doesn't know, if he's conscious enough about that. So then the halacha is that b'rishus hayachid sveikei tamei b'rishus rabim sveikei tar. That means by him saying I don't know creates a real suffix, and therefore the halachas of tumah learned that from Saita. That b'rishus rabim is tar and b'rishus hayachid is tamei. But that means when you ask him, he says I don't know. That's a real suffix, as opposed to a kid who's not old enough to respond to you yes, no, or maybe. So then his suffix is not a real suffix. If he is old enough to, or he knows how to duchen, so then you can give him truma already in the Beis Hagranis. Beis Hagranis is by the fields. When they make the piles of food, you can already give him truma. The issue here is that if Rashi learns something very interesting. Rashi learns that we're talking about a gadol here, not a katan. And Rashi tells you're not allowed to be machalik. You can't give truma to a kid to a child in the in the Beis Hagranis because people don't know. Kids if they know how to be shaman from tumah or not, and therefore they'll be thinking you're not acting properly with truma, and therefore you would not be allowed to give a child truma at all. You can send it home with it, but you can't give it to him to actually to eat truma. Taisus disagrees, and he says here we're talking about a katan, like the rest of this brisa we're talking about a katan, and he holds the issue that they have is that there's a brisa that says that there's a Gemara in Megillah that says that a katan is not allowed to duchen. A katan is not allowed to be paris kapov. So That's why Rashi says we can't be talking about a katan over here. Taisus learns that Gemara is talking about by himself. A katan can't duchen by himself, but he's allowed to duchen with others. Okay, but that's machlokes Rashi Taisus here if we're talking about a katan or a gadol, and it's dependent on whether a katan can duchen by himself, whether a katan can duchen at all. Rashi holds a katan is not allowed to duchen at all. Taisus holds a katan can just not duchen by himself, but he's allowed to duchen with other people.
Come together with all everybody on the stage.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, if a kid knows how to shecht, okay, Rashi says that means he knows how to do it right. He knows how to do the shechita, but he just doesn't know. He doesn't know the halachas, but he knows how to do it. So, Amar you're allowed to eat it. Amar Ravuna who shagadol Amar al gabav. You have to have an adult standing by and making sure that he's doing it right, that he actually does it right. Okay.
Well, let's say he does it right, just has no idea what he's doing.
That's good. That's what we're saying. But it has to be someone supervising. That's what we're talking about. He knows how to shech.
So you don't, but the concept of doing the shechita does not have to do with being gadol.
Leaving concept.
It's a mitzvah.
The shech, the animal, is a mitzvah, right. But there shouldn't be somebody that's responsible or bar mitzvah.
Yeah, you don't. That's the chiddush. You don't have to be bar mitzvah to do a shechita. You need to be. You need to know how to do it. The chiddush is even though he doesn't know the halachas. He's not a bucky in the halachas. As long as there's someone there who knows what they're doing to make sure he does it right, and that he did it right, that's okay. Taisus makes an interesting diak in Rashi, and that is that if you have a katan who doesn't really know what he's doing, but he does it anyway, and a gadol was watching him and saw that he did it right, still no, it would not be good. It has to be that the kid is trained already and he knows what he's doing and he's supervised. You need both. But if he doesn't, if he's not trained, even and let's say he's in training, right? That shechita would not be good. Even if someone is watching him to see that he did it correctly, he hasn't been trained yet, then it would not be a good shechita. That's a diak that makes in Rashi.
In the first paragraph, the issue is that the gadol is watching. You can't see if he twisted the knife or he poked it, right? So that's what the issue is.
Right. The issue. Right. I'm sorry to mention. Rashi says shloisha v'ledaras, that he didn't delay and that he didn't poke. Is correct. Right. Okay. Says the Gemara Vayter. Yachol le'echol kazayis dagon. Once a child is able to eat a kazayis of grain, or one of the 5 grains, then marchikin mitzay asay umeme raglov arba amas. Then when you want to daven, you have to distance yourself. If he has a dirty diaper, or if he's dirties himself, or if that his tzaya has a din of tzaya. That's only from that age when the kid is already eating from the 5 grains. Oh yeah, that's why that's no issue when by Mila when they do a bris milah if the kid makes, so you can still make the bracha. You don't have to they clean it up. Obviously they'll clean it up just to clean it up. But if there's some of that tzaya around, doesn't have a din tzaya, you can still make a bracha. Oh, the Mila. Okay, but you have to be able to eat it, meaning he's eating a kazayas b'toich de'achilas pras, right? Meaning that this kid who's eating a kazayas, that his soya, you have to be marchik from. That's only if he's at the age where he's eating the kazayas toich de'achilas pras, which is between 2 and 9 minutes. Okay. Once a person's a gadol, then it doesn't make a difference if he's eating it b'tech or not. If a guy ate, then it doesn't make a difference. Then when you add das, then you add machiv, you add pain. Rashi says that means here masriach. Things go, they rot. Okay. Once a child is able to eat a kazayis of roasted meat, then he can be included in the Korban Pesach. That's a Pesach. Shenemar ishlafi achlei. He actually has to be able to know not just that he can eat roasted meat, but he actually can identify roasted meat. That if you give him a rock and he throws it away, and egos, vinetle, anybody, if you give him a nut, he'll eat it, he'll take it, That is meaning the pasuk says ishlafi achlei. That means he has to be someone who can he notices or he can differentiate between food and not food. So you need to have that shear in order to be able to eat the carbon pesach. The point over here of tzli is as opposed to mavoshel. It's easier to eat cooked food than it is to eat roasted food. You need to be able to really chew it. Okay, hadron alach lulav hagazel, hadron chalal lulav hagazel, hadron alach lulav hagazel. Now we begin lulav ha'arava. Okay, the Mishnah begins discussing different scenarios of Yom Tov and Shabbos, and when you would fulfill different mitzvahs. So there are a few mitzvahs that we get to do on Sukkot. There's lulav, there's arava, which is a avodah that was done in the base of Mikdash, where they would take an arava and walk around the mizbeach. There was halal, the mitzvah of simcha, which is eating basar shlomim, the mitzvah of sukkah, nisach hamayim, and there was the simchas beis hashoeva, which is called in the Mishnah as hachalil. Chalil is a flute or I think it's a flute, or the chalil. It's a flute or one of those things. Chalil. Yeah. Okay, so those are the mitzvahs we discussed, and we'll see how often you get to do them. So says the Mishnah, lulav arava shisha v'shiva. Lulav arava, sometimes you'll do all 7 days of Sukkot. Sometimes you'll only do 6 days of Sukkot, and then we'll see in the Gemara in the Mishnah why. When halal v'hasimcha, the mitzvah of halal is all 8 days, including Shemini Atzeres, and the mitzvah of simcha is the same. The mitzvah of simcha.
Say simcha, be happy.
So Rashi says it means to eat basar shlomim.
What's his basar shlomim?
Basar, meat from a carbon shlomim. That you brought a carbon shlomim and you would eat it. That's basar shlomim. That's the mitzvah of simcha.
Seasoned or something that everybody.
It was so I remember seeing from Rav Sternberg. He understands the idea there is that it combines this simcha is something that you combining the physical pleasure and the spiritual pleasure. That's why it was dafka basar shlomim. That's why he says that's why wine shares a similar characteristic, because it's not just something that you can physically enjoy, but it gets you into like a higher state. So that's why we say what? No, but it was ruchni stick of food. It was ruchni. You're eating a piece of ruchnius. That's why that's people who dafka like to eat during Shemitah, like to eat the fruit that has kedusha shvis, because when do you get to ingest kedusha? Very few times you get to ingest kedusha, at least it has a kedusha midrabanan. Okay, so that's the simcha and the Rashi darshans where we know that basar shlomim are bring simcha. Okay, that is simcha. That's all 8 days, all seven days of sukkah and Shmini Atzeres. Then we got sukkah, sitting in the sukkah and nisach hamayim, the water libations on the mizbeach with shiva, all 7 days of sukkahs. Hachalil, that's the simchas beis hashoeva, could be 5, chamisha, or shisha, depending when Shabbos you have to fall out. Lulav. Okay, so now we're going to break it down. Lulav shiva ketzad. How do you have lulav for all 7 days? So Gemara says Yom Tov Rishon Shel Chag, Shechal Deis b'Shabbos. If the first day of Yom Tov falls on Shabbos, so then lulav shiva. Then you will take lulav all 7 days. And I forgot to mention, we did mention it before. Lulav 7 days is talking about midya eraisa in the Beis Hamikdash. In the Beis Hamikdash, the mitzvah is to take the lulav all 7 days. The mitzvah midya eraisa is to take lulav 1 day outside the Beis Hamikdash. In the Beis Hamikdash, is the mitzvah is to take it all 7 days. But we'll see in the Gemara, it's only on the first day that they would take the lulav on. If the first day occurred on Shabbos, then they would take it on Shabbos in the Beis Hamikdash. But if any other day was Shabbos, they would not take lulav on that Shabbos. We'll have to understand why should there be such a distinction? Okay, because it's in we'll be the Gemara. We're in the Beis Hamikdash, and we're making it Yisud Rabbanan. So we'll see. Okay, so that's lulav liyas chav. All the rest of the days she shall only be for 6 days. Arava. Putting the arav around the mizbeach shiva, that's also for 7 days. Ketzad, how you can have that for 7 days? Well, that's if yom hashvi shel arav shechal yis b'Shabbos. If the 7th day of Sukkot were to come out on a Shabbos, then you would take it for all 7 days. That means arav. Then arav would be shiva. If Shabbos happened on any other day of Yom Tov, you would not take it on that Shabbos, and it would only be 6 days. So for lulav to be 7 days in the Beis Hamikdash, Shabbos needs to be the first day, and for arava to be all 7 days, Shabbos needs to be the last day.
So there was no rubber the first day?
There's a rava every day except for Shabbos, unless Shabbos is the 7th day.
So if Shabbos was the first day,
You would not do a rava.
you don't do a rubber.
So what is, aren't the two of them connected?
The arava, no, this is talking about taking an individual arava branch and walking around the mizbeach with it. Nothing to do with your lulav
No, they did that in those days.
in the mizbeach and Beis Hamikdash. We
that's
commemorate that by doing how you walking around the bima.
And that's how, and
But
how did you
we
get
walk
there?
around with just the rubbers. We walk around with the
We only do that on a Shana Rabbah, correct?
On the Rabbi, you walk around only
With the aravas, but that's a different.
We use it just the rubbers.
just the Rabbis. Yeah,
Only, oh no, we don't walk around with the aravas.
no, at some point.
At some point, we put down the lulav, and then we pick up the arava, we say a tefillah, and then we
But we
say.
don't
No,
walk around.
isn't that a point?
We don't walk around.
No.
Okay, let's go right.
I think I- True.
Okay, mitzvahs lulav ketzah. So mitzvahs lulav on the first day of Yom Tov that occurs on Shabbos, what would they do in the Beis Hamikdash? So they give us picture this in your mind. So Yom Tov Rishon Shechal is b'Shabbos. Ma'lichan es lulavein laharabayis. So everyone would bring their lulav to harabayis on erev Yom Tov. The chazanin and the gabayim mekablan mehen, they would take it from them. B'saydrin oisen al gabi itztaba, and they would place them on a platform that was in the so it was like the benches that they had set up around with that were covered, these covered benches, and then they put them there. Hazakainim, the elders, manichan eshalem balishka, they put them there in an office so they wouldn't get trampled. Umalamdin ma'isam, and then they would tell everybody when they would hand in their lulav, they'd say, listen, I want you to say, Kal mi shemagia lulavi liyadei, anybody who gets my lulav, harayu shalayv matan, I'm giving it to him as a present. Okay, because you weren't going to get your lulav. Don't expect to get your lulav back. L'macher, the next day they come Shabbos morning, mashkim, and everybody came early. Uban, the chazanin zarkim oislavnem. So chazanin pick them up and they throw them into the crowd.
Can you imagine also throwing the effort with this?
Everything.
Yeah.
You got whole sets being thrown, chucked out. Everybody playing. You know, the esrog doesn't bother me so much. I'm more worried about getting poked by a lulav. Okay, and they were beating each other up to grab a lulav and an esrog. Bezin realized this was getting dangerous. He knew she called stay home, take lulav and esrog at home, and then come to the Beis Hamikdash. All right, we'll continue with Hashem with the Gemara.
You know, I saw
Good night,
something on the
Chavra.
news. Geraldo Rivera.
Right.
You got your invites today?
Yes.
You got your invites?
God willing, we'll be there.
Yes.
Okay, looking forward.
Yeah, reserve, and also we got to send in money. Don't forget about that part.
Thank you, Evan.
Bye, guys.
Good night.
Have you heard the Friendship Club? Friendship Club is from Chabad. It's a Chabad organization. It's a friendship